All right, folks. It's just the men again. Sometimes it feels good that way. But it's Jonathan St. James, and I am your trusty host from The Truth is Still Straight, along with Jim and Donnie St. James. Hello, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. Hello, everyone out there.
Hello, hello.
Okay, so I'm going to go on a little bit of a roast because I want to talk about my displeasure that I have for the movie Coming to America. I was very upset by the movie, just to let you guys know. So, just to give you some purpose to my point here is well, I watched it on Friday, like the other fiend, movie fiend, Jim, because
Yep.
I know he was watching it as well. So basically, I've been talking about this movie for some time now, and I kind of had an idea what the movie was going to be about because I saw the trailer and they gave a big tell. And the tell on that was that the the plot was going to be about the daughter. And when I saw that commercial, I said, "Oh, this is going to be some women's empowerment movie." And sure enough, I saw the movie, and the whole plot really was it was a secret plot to me because they made it seem like it was about the son and a king, but really it was about the daughter. And although they made her a background character, um, although they made her a background character, the plot was really about her. I won't give it too much away because I don't know who is listening that hasn't seen it yet. So I'll give you the opportunity to see it and actually know what it's about for yourself. So I won't give you too much of a spoiler. So not that I have a problem with women's empowerment movies, but you should kind of tell me that up front. Don't kind of hide it in a movie. Just be like, listen, on Lifetime is Coming to America, the daughter of a king. But overall, it was pretty good. You can tell that they used a lot of inauthentic scenes, not so much New York this time as opposed to the first time. But I will tell you the one thing that they excelled at, and that was when they were tying in the storyline to the new movie to and back to the old movie. That they did a good job doing that. So that was pretty good. There was a lot of funny points in the movie. They actually OD'd on cameos. They had too many cameos for this.
I
They had
expect to see Samuel L. Jackson in there.
yeah. And the funny thing is, they had McDowell Zamunda,
That was funny.
which was interesting. But here's the thing: I guess the McDowell's in New York must have closed down because everybody was in Zamunda. Even the Louis Anderson character, he was in Zamunda as well for the opening. So I don't know if there was anyone left in to work at the New York one, the Queens one. I guess they could, but in real life, the Wendy's is not there anymore. There used to be a Wendy's that location. They actually made a building there now, so there's no
Mm.
even location anymore. And of course, the where the Mighty Sharp barbershop was, they could have used it, I guess, because I think it's like a clothing store now. But the area definitely has gentrified a lot from the original movie. So it's just interesting how I mean they could have went there, but
They should have showed it because remember in the original movie when they came and everybody housed all their luggage. I think
mm,
would have been a good contrast how the neighborhood, how New York has changed from at that point to now. And I think it would have been funnier because the Keem could probably been taken back. You know, he could have dropped something. Somebody came in and actually gave it to them instead of being like, from the 80s, with how it was in New York. Akeem could be like, what happened to all the homeless people? There's nobody burning drums anymore, stuff like that. But yeah, I digress.
yeah, that's true. That is true. But overall it was a good movie. I'm wasn't like to the point where like, man, I wasted my time watching this. I wasn't upset like that, but definitely it's a movie. I think I'm one and done. I mean, I would watch it if somebody was, in their home and watching it. But I don't think like if it came on TV, I would go back and watch it over and over like the original one. I must have watched the original Coming to America like 100 times. I wouldn't. I can't see myself doing that with this one. But overall, it was pretty good. If I had to give it out of five, I would probably give it like a three and a half, three and a half. If I was being liberal, I would give it four stars out of five. Okay.
All right. Um, I'll give it a 3. It just lost a lot of charm
Yeah.
for me. A lot of charm. It's like, no wonder. Like it's like when King went there, you're always smiling at the differences between Zamunda and New York at that time. It was for him was like a sense of wonder. And I just didn't get that with this film. It wasn't like I didn't feel like he was like the wonder for finding his son, even though he did smile the same way, which I did appreciate. But I would just for the authenticity of the New York, I thought it would have been better. Like what you said, it was cameo heavy, but it was, but it was the characters that made up Coming to America too, besides Akeem and Semi. That movie just clicked, like with the barbershop guys, the women that they met at the bar, all those things. Like people really, I won't say personalized, but they really like attached to them. And I didn't feel that kind of attachment with these characters, the new ones.
The funny part, though, I did crack up was when the when the father was dying. That part was hilarious.
Yeah, it was actually. It was. It was. That was a coming
And
to
Morgan
America
Freeman
moment.
was pretty funny.
Yes, yes, narrating. Yes, that was a very good idea to put him in there doing that. I think that
Right.
was. I thought that was
I
funny.
didn't know he was going to be in the movie. That was a pretty hidden
Yes,
secret there. That part was
yes,
funny. And I must say, I did like Leslie Jones in the movie. She was good in the movie. She was
yes. She wasn't too over the top. She was,
right. She was way better in this movie than she was in Ghostbusters.
uh, don't mention that again. Yeah, this role really did suit her.
And I
this
didn't
was
like
even
I
kid.
didn't like Tracy Morgan in the movie. I didn't.
I'm indifferent, but I could see your point.
Yeah, to me, he didn't add anything to the movie.
I think he just plays himself in movies. Really.
You know what? Oh, wow. That is crazy because I was just going to say that. I was literally going to say that. Wow. Donnie, you are some kind of mind reader.
Yeah, powers.
Wow. That is exactly how I would put it. He definitely, and that's my thing when I like actors and actresses. I base it on the ability to not know that they're just a person being this character, if that makes sense to you. Like Denzel Washington always feels like the character that he's playing. Halle Berry, to me, feels like Halle Berry in that role. Like Angela Bassett, like I look at Angela Bassett as every character that she plays. Like that's what I love about Angela Bassett. Like when she plays a role, I never say, "Oh, that's Angela Bassett playing what or Alfie Woodard." Like Alfie Woodard is probably one of the greatest actresses that ever lived because woo, she puts herself in the role. When she was in that movie Holiday Heart, when she played that drug addict, oh my goodness.
Yes, yes.
She should have got an Oscar award for that role. So that's usually what I base my I base my critiques when it comes to acting. And Donnie, you hit it right on the head when you said that he's playing himself in these movies because this is true. He's
True.
just the
It is
same,
true.
whether it was Martin when he was Hustle Man, or he was in that whatever that movie was with Bruce Willis when they were cops. Just all these roles are like the same. Even when he's in an animated movie, he's just himself in an animated movie. So yeah, so that's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, the character fits in. You don't fit the character.
Right, exactly.
I can see that.
All right, so enough of that. So it's time to get into the topics. And today's topic is going to be you gotta be in it to win it. Now, I'm not sure if this slogan has reached to the rest of the country, but in New York, you gotta be in it to win it means the lotto. So they say if you don't buy a ticket, you won't win the lotto. And of course, that's true. I mean, for the most part, you play the lotto, you're not going to win anyway, but at least you have a one in like a gazillion chances if you buy one ticket. But anyway, this is actually talking about in terms of relationships. So I've sort of been talking to some of the listeners of the show, kind of getting a gauge for where people are at in terms of hearing what we're saying and listening to what we're saying. So there's an old saying that people hear, but they don't listen. And what does that mean? Very simple. It's like the garbage truck or a plane. You hear it, but you're not listening to it to say, "Oh, that's a Mack truck," or "That's a Boeing 737," or so you hear it because there's a sound, but you're not really listening to the point of what it is that you're hearing. And that's the same thing that we're talking about here. So we're kind of circling back to sort of have a intimate discussion on some of the issues that people have when it comes to facing relationships. So first of all, you hear a lot of people talking about, oh, I can't find a good relationship. Well, guys don't really say. They just say they can't find a good looking woman. And let's be honest. So, in all fairness, people, let's just leave it to people. And people say, well, I can't find a good man. I can't find a good woman. So, what's going on here? Okay. So, let's talk about the first issue at hand. And the first issue is availability. So, we all know us living in modern day times, and for those of us who are older, like myself, and then the silver medalist over there is Jim, and then Donnie is the bronze because he's a distant third in terms of age here. But
Very distant. Very distant. I'm not
right,
ashamed to admit it.
but the deal is here is in my day. So in my day, how people got together was socializing. Boys and girls socialized, and if I saw a girl that I liked, I was like, "Hey, do you have a boyfriend? Would you like to go out?" And that was the cue for like, "Do can I be your boyfriend?" And basically, if they liked my approach and they didn't have a boyfriend, they'd say yes. It didn't really matter if I was cute or not, because a few times I got with some very cute girls in my life, and I wasn't looking cute. I'll be honest. When I was 15, I wasn't very attractive in terms of presentable. I wasn't presentable for a relationship. Let's just put it that way. I was very awkward looking, had a lot of facial hair to be 15 years of age, didn't cut my hair. So I didn't have the best clothing attire, but I liked this girl. And I remember that I was a little scared to talk to her because all the guys liked her. And I was like, I don't have a shot because I'm just beat down looking guy because I'm poor. I didn't have any money. I just really started working. I was only working like 20 hours a week. I was making $4 an hour. And back in those days, $4 was nothing. I mean, it's nothing now, but back then, when it should have been something, it was nothing because we didn't have this Metro card system where when you needed to go somewhere, you could take the bus and the train. So back then, it was a token for everything. So you took a token to get on the train, took a token, and you had to put it in for the bus. So we didn't have all of these luxuries of transportation like people have today. So anyway, I liked this girl. I told my sister. My sister went and told her, and then she saw me, and she gave me a shot, which was interesting because, like I said, I was very awkward looking. I mean, through no fault of my own, I didn't have guidance to tell me shave, get your gear together. Well, I couldn't get my gear together. I didn't have money to buy a lot of clothes back then, but I could have shaved and cut my hair. That I could have done, but I just didn't have any guidance back then in terms of parents and stuff like that to tell me what to do. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, she gave me a shot. We ended up dating, I think. We were in a relationship for about a year and a half. So that's a pretty long time in terms of teenage years. But the point of that I'm really trying to make there is there was a way that she knew I liked her, so she spoke to me. I spoke to her. I told her that I liked her, and then she gave me a shot because she didn't have a boyfriend. That's pretty much how it worked back in the day. Unfortunately, the 90s hit and the world turned upside down. So I like to call it the knocking the boots era. And what does that mean? That means the era where sex was the main point of people getting together. Now, yes, I'm in my 40s. So, full disclosure, I come from an era where it wasn't. Sex was a byproduct of emotion, of passion, of love that you have for somebody. So, it wasn't necessarily a given that you would have sex with someone that you were in a relationship. It was that you like them, you love them, and if it happened, it happened. If it didn't, if you really had feelings for the person, you live with that. You didn't go nuts and say, "I know I'm just gonna," I mean, I've been in lots of relationships where I didn't have sex with the person. It happens back then. Now we go to knocking the boots 90s, and everything changes. The world has become very sexualized, and now we have people that want sex more than they want relationships. So when you have that, you have guys that are like, "Hey, I want to have sex with you." I mean, they don't say that, but that's what they're really saying. So they're like, "Oh, let's have sex." And the woman or the girl is like, I'm not giving these buns up to you. You're not getting these boots like that. You got to be my man." So what do guys do? They became their men. They got together, got the boots, got the sex, and then that was pretty much the death of the relationship. So they kind of moved on after that in during the 90s. So it became women do the same thing too. Kaya came out with My Neck, My Back. And then women had the same idea as men. They gonna get them boots too. So it came to the point where people were thinking more about sex than they were thinking about love. I mean, people want love, but a lot of times the sex overpowered the love element to the relationships. So that's my dynamic of there. So, fast forward to 2021 and 2020 and a few years before that, we have people complaining about relationships because they can't find them. But here's the problem: it's what we view relationships. And that's really what I want to boil down to it. So I'm going to give my monologue to that. And I want to get Jim and Donnie's ideas of how they see relationships in modern times. And then we can sort of get into the nuances of relationships and the issues that come along with them. All right, Jim, what do you have?
Um, I'm part of the knocking boots 90s. That I started from that era, so my take on it probably is a little bit skewered from yours. It was for me, it was lack of self-confidence, my appearance, and my interests that affected my relationship with people, my or with relationships at all. My interests were somewhere else. I did not have a normal type of teenage years. I was more into wonder and exploring and learning. Let's just say I call it learning. I was more into learning than relationships. And like you, I was when we came to social interaction, especially with girls, with teenage girls. I was very awkward. I didn't like their interest. I know I didn't like it. I had to like fake it sometimes. And when you're younger, your patience runs out faster. So when stuff like that, when my patience ran out, I was just like, this is not working for me, stuff like that. And usually, it was taken the wrong way. I didn't have a full grasp of understanding of them, and vice versa. But it was mostly my fault that I figured that. And My dynamic is always probably going to be skewed for mostly everybody's. But from that point on, I do agree with you. Um, Teenage girls in my time were unsure of what they wanted in a relationship. They either, they listened to the beginning of using the outside influence more to have them make their decisions. Um, Made it, I won't say impossible, but the opportunities were getting less and less for certain type of people who didn't fit a dynamic, and it was getting skewered to one side. And I noticed that if the influences, outside influence, becoming more and more heavier. It was, either from what you hear and see on TV, what you either read in magazines, what you saw in our movies. That heavy influence. That I think that's the generation where the heavy influence really started cropping up of what a relationship should be, and I think that skewered the opportunity for other people who might not fit the criteria of what was being sold. And fast forward to today, all that just basically went to the left. All the relations went to the left. And now what you're seeing is now the bell curve starting to shift, because individuals now do not know what they want, but they really don't. They're trying to figure that out, but once again, they're going to the outside influences that may not be beneficial. So I feel that the bell curve will start to shift, but it will take probably a generation or two for it to try to get back into the I won't say normalcy, but expectancy of what a real relationship is versus what's being told to you or what you pass on, because the mistakes or the ideals of my generation was passed on to the next one and the one after that. So as the younger people are trying to figure out for themselves now, without outside influence, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But it will, like I said, it will try to realign itself to as much as possible based on, your ideal of giving somebody a shot, love, and chance, and not really too about, what you can offer, what you look like, how your shoes look, stuff like that. It'll be more about an emotional connection first instead of a physical, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, Donnie. So you're a little bit newer to life than we are. So, in your wisdom, what do you see in terms of relationships and how they are in this day and age?
Yeah, even though I'm newer in life, I feel like I've been through like two divorces by now, so I can speak a lot about that. Yeah, the funny thing about generations, I guess, as you and Jim were mentioning, the people who the two lines of thought where there's more of like a push for a traditional relationship, and the push for a sexual one, both of those generations are currently alive and have kids who are around my age, and as a result you see like a huge clash of people who are flipping back and forth between either side, because you just have like this constant like exchange, I guess, of these ideas. You don't it's a very confusing situation to navigate, because while it's like you were raised, for example, with you being people my age, not just everyone, you were raised with great all these Disney movies which project a fantastical view of romance. You also grew up watching I don't know, listening to music that was particularly vulgar, or watching TV that or movies that show the same. You see a lot of people around my age range kind of be unsure of how to approach the kind of dating scene, I guess. You see people who either wanted to do the relationship thing, but maybe they got hurt somewhere along the way, so they flipped the other way, even though that might not be exactly what they want. Um, or you see people who are in relationships, but they don't have a reference for what a good relationship looks like. So maybe it ends up differently. It has definitely become very more muddled over time, I guess.
Yes. And I'm glad that you said that, because that was one of the thoughts that I definitely had in my head. So I think I want to start off from there, because I think it's important that when we talk about relationships and the failures of them, that we really talk about how it happens. And the point that you made is, where do people get the mentality and the ideology for relationships? And that's basically on what they see around them. So you hit two great points. The one is the Disney romanticized part of relationships, which is pretty much unattainable. And if it's attainable, it's for a very short amount of time, because in the beginning, it feels like Disney. And then in the end, it just feels like a freaking episode of Adult Swim on the Cartoon Network, which is all dysfunction. So you have that. And then you have, like you said, people's upbringings, who they've been raised by, their family environments, their societal environments, the neighborhood, the culture. So those are the things that play heavy into how people perceive relationships and people. So the first thing I really want to talk about is your parents, your family background. So, ladies, and I guess gentlemen too, because we suffer the same way. The first thing I want to say is, first and foremost, if you go back to episode 1 of this podcast, Knowing Your Dysfunction, that is for everyone. That is for everyone. Like I say in my commercial. No, I don't say that in the commercial. I'm just kidding. But everyone has a dysfunction, believe it or not. No matter how perfect you think your lifestyle is, you too have a dysfunction. Why? Because families are not perfect. So we see things, or we've experienced things that hurt us, whether it may be your parents not getting along, domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assaults, molestation. Those things all factor in to why people have dysfunctions in relationships. So you carry those things from child to adult, and you don't even realize it. I mean, sometimes these things happen to you, but you don't realize that it's playing uh, a role in the detriment of your relationships with people. And that's why it's very important for you to be able to identify who you are before you get into relationships. So for those of you who've been struggling in relationships, take today right now and identify your dysfunction, especially if you're struggling, especially if you've gone through divorces, bad relationships, 3, 4, 5 engagements to somebody. Just go through your dysfunction and see what it is that you have in your life that's causing you to not have positive relationships. So I want to start there. So Jim, what do you think about what I just said? What is your impression? I mean, am I right? Am I wrong? What do you think?
You're right for knowing your dysfunction for to start your relationship. Knowing yourself and knowing what you can do is a very good factor that you don't overpromise and underperform. It gives a person a good gauge also, because you're being honest. If you could be honest with yourself, you could be honest with the person you're trying to have a relationship with. Um, Disappointments are a part of life. People shield each other feelings because they don't want to be disappointed, angry, upset at them, and at the status of what things are going on. That has to stop. You can tell a person the truth in a dignified way, and it could be conveyed that way also. So I really do agree with knowing your dysfunction. Based upon that. Secondly, like I said, the outside influence. We are inundated with ideas of what relationships can be or should be, or the overcoming of abuse or something like that, what you said. But what about a relationship that doesn't have to be overcome with abuse or trauma or something like that? We should start focusing more on correcting that type of thing that we see in media. media. The purpose of, TV shows, movies, is to show a conflict and then how it's resolved. But for most relationships, you really don't need to do that. You don't really need to emulate. Everybody's too busy emulating what they see and what they hear. You don't have to do that. You don't have to cause excess grief, guilt, or struggle because you saw it somewhere and the outcome was what you see. Those things are scripted. Life is not scripted. And we have to realize that things do happen. Yes, mistakes or unfortunate circumstances do happen. We have to learn from it in a real way and not what you see or hear on Instagram, Facebook, movies, media, magazines. The inundation of those type of things of bombardment confuses people. You see it all the time. And the expectations, other people's expectations, you emulate those when you should have expectations for yourself and how you're going to achieve it. Once you have that, you can portray your expectations realistically now and what you want to do with relationship and with your life. And then you can portray it and see if somebody else is on board with it. And if you get positive feedback, or if they give you something that you didn't think of and that you can apply to yourself, the bonding of ideas and merging of expectations for a relationship, it doesn't always have to be aligned, but if you could bounce off of that and feed it, I think that will lead to a more positive result because you know what it's there. And the whole Disney, and then, I'll look at, Lifetime movies and, Black movies, like Tyler Perry and stuff like that. Most of them have too much internal conflict that the other partner resolves, not themselves. Most of the time, I do feel like the other partner resolves it for them or say the mistakes are okay. No, that's not really the lesson. The lesson is that they overcome it through support, and through support of others, but through the strength and will of their own. You can always have support, someone pushing you to do the right thing, stuff like that. But you can't expect the other person to do it for you. And I see that sometimes in some of these movies, stuff that, I don't want to, go through too much extremes, but I do see that. And then I see people's attitude emulating that. No more emulation. Individualism of what each person could bring, because we are all unique. We might have the same thoughts, the same processes sometimes, but you must be willing to accept a different one that may be a little bit better. You don't have to stay stuck on that one gear that everybody just seems to think that being stuck in that one gear and they're going to get that desired result. No. And that's really how I'm starting to feel most about it sometimes in terms of what you were discussing.
All right, Donnie. So Jim unpacked a lot there. So
sorry.
What do you have to comment on that? Or what I said, actually?
Sure. I guess. I guess since he did unpack a lot there, so I guess I'll kind of pivot a little bit. Yeah, I guess one of the biggest outside influences that ends up impacting the relationships of people going forward is, it's not exactly outside, but it's as you might have mentioned this, but the parents.
Yes.
Oftentimes when I mean, how many times do you see this story? I know at least 3 or 4 people who've gone through this, but you see a parent, a husband and a wife maybe, who the father goes and is unfaithful. It comes out, but then they stay together for the sake of the children or whatever reason they give it. Those situations are so common, and when you have whether it be a boy or a girl grow up and that's their example of what a relationship is, they're gonna go into the world not really believing in the concept of love in the traditional sense, at least. If someone watches their parent not really show regard for the relationship and just do what they want, maybe they'll emulate those behaviors. Or on the flip side, you'll see people be unwilling to engage in relationships because they don't want that experience to be what their life's about. They don't want to just go waste their time in something like that. Uh, and those are things that often get overlooked, even because the closer things are to you, the more likely you really are to overlook them. Uh, Unfortunately, many people can't make use of their peripheral vision very well, for a lack of better words, I guess.
Yeah, that's good. I like that you said that peripheral vision. I know, well, hopefully everybody knows what that means. But if you don't, it just means the ability to see things off to the side that are in your approach, but not in your front view. So, like if you're walking straight, you can kind of see things off to the side. So, just in case, I'm not assuming everybody knows every word in English. I don't know every word in English, but just in case. But you brought up some good points, and I think that I wanted to talk about. I want to kind of stay sort of like a 1, 2, 3 up the ladder progression in terms of when we talk about people getting into relationships, because I notice that people tend to repeat cycles. So if you have parents that have bad relationships, often the kids repeat. And it doesn't matter even in relationships, just in general life. You have a lot of times you have parents who made bad errors and judgment calls in life. The kids often do it because a lot of times what happens, the parents are not equipped with the know-how to say, don't do what I did, do better than I do, encourage them to do the right thing, be a better person than I was. You A lot of times, I don't know if it's because they're not equipped to. Sometimes there's a jealousy that sometimes parents don't want kids doing better than them. So you can have it where they won't say anything because they rather them be in the same boat. And I've seen it time and time again where I've seen parents ruin their lives of their children because they didn't want them being better off than themselves. So a lot of times children repeat the cycle of the people that came before them. We talk about the welfare generation, that a lot of people, there's generational. So you'll have the mother, then the kid, and then the grandkids. And I remember when I was young, I used to live in the projects in the Lower East Side, Lillian Ward houses, and we had a neighbor that they had so many generations on public assistance living in that apartment. And then we came back years later and they had more generations of people living in that apartment that were on public assistance. So in a situation like that, you have parents that don't encourage their kids to do better than themselves. And you'll see it a lot of times, even in relationships. I remember when I was a kid, about 18 years old, I had a girlfriend, and I know her parents were telling her, don't be serious. Don't take relationships seriously. Have fun. But here's the problem with that. You're not telling the kid what the fun is. Have fun. You're not saying what have fun means. So what does have fun to a kid mean? Well, don't have one boyfriend, right? So she took her parents' advice and she didn't have one boyfriend. She had lots of boyfriends. But here's the problem. What do you think happens? We're talking about the 90s now. Knocking the boots 90s. So what happened? She was knocking the boots all over Brooklyn. Okay. So that was bad advice, because not only did you tell your daughter not to settle for one guy, you forgot to tell her, well, don't be sleeping around while you're doing that, because you got to teach kids virtues, morals, and values. Because if you don't teach them virtues, morals, and values, they're gonna figure it out on their own. And if they didn't have a good guy beforehand, they're only gonna use like Jim said, is the outside influences. And when you're a teenager, your friends are your influence a lot of times. Unless you're like a person like me, I didn't really. My friends didn't carry a lot of weight in influencing me, but you have people who they're friends of their whole lives. My girlfriend at that time, her friends were everything. So she listened to them, um, hung out, got drunk, started smoking, stuff like that. And it didn't end up well for her, but it's a generational cycle. But here's the problem. And this is what I always say with those outside influence. I don't want to go past the outside influence because I want that to be a topic by itself. But you know what? I'll wait. I don't want to go past that. But that's how it ended up because parents didn't train the kids well to do what's right, not only for the time being, but for the future. And this is very important when you look at life. You look at life as an investment. I mean, you don't want to buy a stock that's good today and then tomorrow it tanks. And then now you find out the stock you bought today is terrible tomorrow. It doesn't work like that. Most people, they try, I mean, it's not a perfect science, but most people invest in stocks that they think will do strong after the day they bought it. And it's the same thing with your life. Once you invest into something, you have to think that whatever you're investing in will eventually pay dividends. Because if not, it's going to tank. Just the law of averages says so. All right, Jim. So let's focus on that. I don't want to get too far because then we're jumping along the topics. I want to keep it there and then go on to the outside influences topic.
All right. Sure. I want to ask Donnie 2 questions though. With the parents, I want one, did they outright tell the child that, they were stepping outside the marriage, or they figured it out on their own?
So in my own personal experience with people who I've met, they were directly told.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bold. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm just going through like from my generation. Yeah. And secondly, was there any outside children born from that type of unions? Half brother, half sister.
So as far as I am aware of, no, and I suppose that's usually what the biggest differentiator in whether or not people are willing to continue it for the sake of it, I guess, if there were children.
Okay, all right. No, it was just an interesting, topic. Interesting discussion that you brought up with the type of reasons why a child will see while a parent will stay in the marriage. Usually, for my generation, they'll hide the fact that there's infidelity on both sides, on one side, or both sides. The animosity will build up between the parents and their kids. Sometimes they get the backlash end of it, but they won't tell them why. So I'm just surprised that the parents are very straightforward in telling them what's going on, and hopefully that wasn't used as a manipulation tool. Something for later, another topic for later, as a manipulation tool. With that, in retrospect in mind, my own personal experience was my parents got divorced when I was 1, and I didn't grow up with a father figure. And the parent that I did have was de-evolved the thinking of what a family is over time. It wasn't like that when we was younger. It de-evolved over time. I'm not sure it's through influence or way of thinking. I cannot explain that. I can't get into that person's head. But it de-evolved, and the internalization of the struggle of that one parent was enough for me to change my whole way of thinking about relationships. Like I said, I'm not sure if I'm an outlier. I'm not sure if more people speak up about that type of experience. But my father got remarried. I have a half sister, and I never knew about her until I turned 20. She's way younger than us because she wasn't born until after a couple of years well. And the reason I found out was, my whole family history is crazy, but the reason I found out was that divorce from my parents wasn't finalized until 1989. So that was a whole 10 years for a divorce to be finalized. And the intent of my father was very sinister on why he did things. And when you find out these things later, it affects on how you deal relationships. And that's why I asked you about the openness of your parents. My parents weren't open until now. And at the prime, not until now, until I was 20. And at that time, my prime, that shattered a lot of things of what I thought relationships should be. And sometimes it's beneficial to be open with your children, um, and to tell them, this is the situation that's happening, and not have them internalize the behavior or the type of feedback that you're getting from both parents or emotions, because taking in emotions versus, and feedback from them is very negative damage on what the child will end up doing in their relationships. And sorry, I'm getting choked up here. I don't like talking about my childhood too much. This is the first time I'm really opening up. Um, when I see through other people, when they talk about their childhood, their upbringing, and stuff like that, I internalize it and empathize if I don't have been through it, and sympathize greatly if I've been through it. And it, it hurts. It really does hurt. But I try to tell them there is a way that you don't have to be with like your parents. And the whole, like what Jonathan said, the whole welfare generation, I've seen that. I've seen children from that generation forge their own paths because they realized their parents were not what they were made to be. And it is possible to have a great relationship on poor beginnings. That's what I've learned. It's not how you begin, it's how you finish. And you can have basically next to nothing in terms of social skills, upbringing, opportunity. And you could transform it into and mold it into something you can use for a positive effect, or not only on your life, but on everybody else around you. You can always try to give a better hand than what was given to you. So, people say, you dealt the cards in life. That's what you used to play. But sometimes, people don't realize deck could be reshuffled and you could get another set of hand or cards. It's all how what you do with it. And Johnathan learned from that, like what he said. I think Donnie, you have learned from that greatly at a person your age. It took me a while to figure that out, but I'm mostly proud of you for what you've done from that aspect, because you seem a very astute person when it comes to your experiences and what you've learned from your past relationships. And I think you guys should really applaud yourself as a positive guide for other people, especially if you're there listening, because you don't have to have that cycle. It's a choice. Everything, you were given choice from the moment that you became self-aware of yourself, not in the womb. Not can I say that you became aware of choice, and what the Bible said, God has given you choice as well. And you can either choose to do that. It'll be more difficult if you go against the norm, but don't be afraid to do it. If you see something that needs correcting or something that you realize that isn't normal, you can correct it. You have the strength and the fortitude to do it. You're looking at listen to two examples here. And I do believe that, your upbringing can have an effect, but it does not, that scar can heal. You can let it heal.
All right, Donnie. So, yeah. So, what do you have to offer to this discussion?
Sure. So real quick, of course, thank you, Jim, for the nice words. Something that you just mentioned actually is a big thing that I've noticed. You asking me that follow-up question made me think about it more. As you said, your parents weren't very open. I think the way in which a parent interacts with their children will dramatically affect their relationship in terms of openness. When you don't have that sort of openness with your parents, like luckily my own personal acquaintances and friends have had their parents be mostly open about issues like that. Obviously it's not perfect, but mostly. If you were to have some sort of infidelity or cheating happen in a relationship as a group of as a set of parents, and you don't explain any of the things that are happening, however, of course, children are more perceptive than people will give them credit for. Your child will notice little cracks, like ways in which you might verbally abuse each other or whatnot. And when they go forward into their life, they're going to, maybe they don't explicitly remember those things, but at least subconsciously, they're going to be considering those as being just a part of a relationship. When it's not explained to them as, oh, this is a thing that shouldn't be happening between your other parent and I, but it is. When it's just like a thing that's swept under the rug and it's not acknowledged, it becomes normal. So when they go forward into the world and they're trying to have relationships with people, they're less you see people who are going to be less inclined to want to be romantically involved, because romanticism or romantics involve all the other things that they saw that were maybe toxic or unhealthy in their childhood that weren't properly addressed. Whereas if you're just going to go hook up with someone, be friends with benefits or whatever other label, no complications come with that. So you'll see a lot more people be willing to interact with that because that works out way better than whatever other official, more exclusive relationship would. At least that's what they think as a result of what they've seen. And obviously, I mean, that's fair. If all you saw was toxic relationships growing up around your family or immediate friends or whoever else, you're going to assume that's just what it is for everyone. And there's no, if you didn't have that openness going back and forth with you and your parents, you're not going to be so willing to be that open with people who you aren't related to, perhaps. And then it just, as you said, it just becomes a cycle over and over again.
Yeah, so when I think of parents, sometimes I think you have to keep in mind as a parent how you interact with each other in front of your kids. Sometimes honesty is good, and then sometimes transparency is not good either, because not every child is equipped to understand the truth that's given to them. So you gotta really know your kid, and you gotta really know how they respond to things. As a parent, like I know if I'm saying something that's traumatic, sometimes you got to wait a little while, or if that's something that's even worth discussing. And if it's life changing, sometimes, it depends on the circumstance. So, I don't want to get too much into that, because we're really talking about from the child perspective and not from the parent perspective, because it's the child that becomes the adult. And then what happens to them is a reflection of what they've experienced a lot of times at the vision of what parents and other family members experience around them.
Yeah, I understand what you. I'm sorry, Kato. I understand what you're saying in that, but I think like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Go ahead.
I want to get to the next topic because we're already kind of
Okay.
far into the discussion here. So I want to go on to the next topic because I don't want to keep going back to the same one. And then, I
Okay.
think the other.
No, I just had a follow-up question, but I'll keep that for later. Like if we come roundabout, don't
Well,
worry
if
about
you
it.
have the question, ask the question now, because I don't know if we'll have time in the end. So you might as well just shoot it out.
No, I mean, okay. I was about to ask you, in terms of that, and I want to say, should you honestly, would you rather wait for the child to approach you with that type of question? Not even really a child at this point, or probably a teenager, or probably starting out in life in adult. But would you wait for a child to approach your child to approach you on a certain topic that may be, in terms of that line of aspect, or in terms of what we're talking about? Would you rather wait for the child to approach you?
I think it depends on a couple of things. Is this what the issue is? If you're talking about infidelity, if you're talking about that, how do you really have that discussion to a kid? How do you really talk to a kid about cheating? So it depends on the maturity of the person. Some young people are very mature. Some young people are not mature at all. Some young people become immature adults. So it really depends on the maturity of the person, because it also depends on the outcome of what's happening. Because if there's no reflection, if people just work their issues out and they keep on moving, there's forgiveness involved and people moving, then what do you reveal to the child? Because then that confuses themselves. So certain you got to know when to reveal things, when to conceal them. Because there has to be a point to the message. Advertisement companies don't make commercials just to make commercials. There's a message in the commercial. So when you're telling a child something, there has to be a point to you telling them that. And there has to be an understanding of why they're being told that and what is going to be the outcome of you revealing that information to them. Because if you're just telling them just to tell them, now you're actually challenging the child to deal with a possible trauma. So, you have to weigh the child that you have, the maturity, the understanding of life that they have attained at that point in time, and then what the circumstances are and what's actually happening that you reveal those things to them. Because if not, you'll have them take that trauma as adults. And when my parents broke up, there was like, hey, this is what's going on, blah blah blah, this and this, and I heard a lot of fingers being pointed. There wasn't a really clever and kind discussion on what was happening. I received the harshest news, whatever, and that affected me, and probably until recently. The trauma that went on in my life traveled with me until an adult, and I didn't even realize that. It's only till you, like, again, I say, you got to look into the mirror, and when you see things that are not right, you have to figure out, well, why are they not right? Why am I like this? Why am I allowing this to happen? Why am I going through this? Then I have to take a look in the mirror and see, wow, this has affected me. I let circumstances through my family affect me, how I dealt with relationships, and it's been very difficult. And in the thing that I've done wrong, that played a factor into many things that I've done wrong. Probably accepting poor treatment in relationships, not opening up, not being as active in certain relationships that I could have been. And that all comes from my family circumstances. So I've had to graduate and sort of come to this level now that I understand I've been through some things, and even me sit down, talk to some mental health professionals, and sort of let go of those things that cause dysfunction in my life and in my relationship. So, that's, like I said, there's got to be you got to be very understanding of what you're doing before you do it. Because if you're not going to offer a child to maybe get counseling if they need it, then it can be very detrimental, and it can actually continue the cycle that you've experienced. So,
Okay.
and moving on to the next topic. Wow, that was a whole segment right there.
So
uh,
sorry, I didn't want to lose the question. As I said, I could
that's
say
okay.
if we have a roundabout. Okay.
That's all right. I wanted to get it out now because it may have not made sense later to talk about it. But I wanted to go back to the outside influences, and to me, that's probably the biggest drawback to relationships, and that's outside influences. And that's people getting advice, people getting ideas, people following behind the wrong people and the wrong things. So the worst influences to relationships are, one, your family. That's one of the worst. And then your friends. Because a lot of times, here's the realness about influencing. We have more people in our circle that don't want us to succeed than people outside of the circle. And that's just a fact. We have what they call the frenemies. And most of us have them. We have people that we think are friends. They're around us. They have good times with us. We drink, we eat with them, we do excursions with them, we work with them, but they secretly hope for your failure and your downfalls. So, anytime you're at a crossroad or you're at a place where you need to figure out what to do next, they'll offer you the advice based on misery, loving company. So you have a coworker, oh man, you having problems with your woman, man, just go get another one out there and don't tell her. And so, that's what they would do. That's what they are doing. Or you have somebody, oh, don't get married now. You're too young. Go to school, finish your school. When you get your career and you're making big money, you could settle down, get married, have kids, and all of that. Or he's ugly, or he's broke, or whatever the situation is. It's these outside influences that they'll tell you what to do. They may not necessarily take the advice that they're giving you, or they may be doing the exact same thing that you are doing. But there's these outside influences that want to tell you to do things that they shouldn't, that for one, they're not qualified to tell you. Half of these people that we get advice from are not qualified. And I don't mean qualified as in a professional. I mean qualified as in mentally fit to give you any kind of advice, because how they see life is just way beyond the realm of reality. So you're going to get a twisted and sadistic viewpoint of the world from somebody who's not qualified to tell you those things. All right, Jim. So you're on the clock now.
Outside influences are the most damaging part of the relationship. Like Richie said, family and friends are the first and foremost. And you are absolutely correct. People you normally would trust to have your best interest in mind may not, and it's hard. Some people can't tell the difference. They can't differentiate. And I have been a victim of it. And, um I, took it as that. And what I really didn't realize at first, that most of the time when people make decisions, it's not them speaking, it's someone else. And to that difference didn't, not realizing that difference had a negative effect on me, having personal relationships with people, interacting with people, having simple conversations with people, because I realized the way of thinking, well, it took me a long time, was not their way, but it was somebody else. It's speaking through somebody else. And knowing that for me, I was able to differentiate that's not really them, or that's not really their attitude. Because when you get them away from those influences, the conversation turns into something different. I feel like, if they're not allowed to be themselves, or they can't be themselves in front of their family and friends, what's the point? And, once I realized that type of difference, I, stepped away, because that's not really what I want. And, a lot of people are lost, and you know what? You're allowed to be lost. You're allowed to be confused, but you have taking the experiences of, what you said, inside people, misery love company. They don't want you getting something. They don't want you getting something faster than they do. The whole idea of competition is self taught. Like, you always gotta be on top. You always gotta be tough. And that's fine. But what you're sacrificing to do all these things to get, what you think you deserve or want, is, you don't know if that they're damaging another person. And some people, they don't do it on purpose. I realize that. It's just that that's how they feel, based upon what they have learned themselves through outside influence. And they haven't differentiate between that themselves. I really do believe, sometimes, that the advice they're giving is it's not intended to be malicious, but it's just what is dictated to them. And they take that and they pass it along. And, you try not to, when you realize that, you try not to get too upset at them, because they're just as confused as the person they gave the advice to. And you are very correct, mentally fit to give the advice. And most people are not mentally fit. They just regurgitate what they got and just pass it on to the next person, like that's the norm. And it's not. It's opinion and of one person that's just put out there faster and more publicated quickly than the other information that you will receive afterwards. So people usually, when rumors and stuff first started happening, it's always the first information that they receive. It's not a follow-up. It's not people don't follow up. They usually don't care about the facts that come out afterwards. It's always the initial reaction that you hear first. So whatever advice, most of the time, that they get first, they listen to that more than what they get afterwards, because what they get afterwards, they don't want to adjust their way of thinking, or they don't want to take in all the facts. And that's the second problem. You can be told one thing, and then secondly told another thing that's probably true, or to correct what was heard first. But most people don't want to hear that. And that is the part where we have to really start paying attention to, is what we hear afterwards. The initial advice is there, yes, and that's what you receive, yes, but there are opportunities. There are some things that you hear afterwards that you can correct. So it's like, having a court trial, one fact comes out about the case, but then when they realize that's not a fact, it's out there, but people don't pay attention to that. It's always on what you hear first. And it's like a race to say that, oh, well, this is first. No. It's a race to hold the attention. And I realize that people's attention spans, reading comprehension, are getting shorter and shorter. They don't want to figure out things. They want to be told things. And that's where part of where we as a society and relationships start messing up. We shouldn't be told things. We should be given advisories, personal experiences, yes, but it's not meant to be for you to be taken as an end all be all. And then when you find out something else, you don't want to correct it. And that is where I have the problem with. And, it's just being self-aware, cognizant, yes, you got that initially, but most of the time I do realize it's that there's a follow-up and we just don't pay attention to it, or we just ignore it.
All right, Donnie. So I guess you're the young person in the group. So what is your perspective on the outside influence?
I suppose one of the important things to check that both of you have just mentioned, someone's emotional fitness, like how fit is someone emotionally to do something versus, or give advice, as opposed to them just being physically capable. Because everybody can say words, can say things that might sound nice, but not everybody is, of course, qualified. Of course, there was that episode about who can tell you the truth. We talked about this kind of thing before here. I think the one of the bigger problems is people have the incorrect approach to advice. Like as Jim just mentioned, it often gets it's just something they heard that they regurgitated back at you. I think a lot of people take advice as, hey, you tell me what to do and then I'll go do it. It should really be a matter more of, tell me what, hopefully I can word this properly. Tell me what you would do, and then you take that and just ponder it on your own. I would never just hear somebody's advice and be like, yep, that's it, 100%. I'd say take somebody's words and then see what that can give you. If there's some sort of knowledge that you can take from that. Maybe if someone did something, didn't go well, maybe you could take that and adjust where you're gonna go. Or maybe if someone approached something in a certain style, you could just loosely base it off of that. But a lot of people are very into just following exactly what someone tells them. And what the more practical problem with that is sometimes that means, we've mentioned this before too, you're doing something that you don't really want to do. You're doing something that someone else would do, and because it worked for them, you hope that it does the same for you. Outside influences, like, of course you should be able to go ask your parents or your friend or whoever for advice. However, you shouldn't go trying to emulate them, is what I'm trying to say.
And that's pretty good. That's pretty good words of wisdom there. And I wanted to talk about something while we're at it. And this is a big thing. And the issue that I have is not issue, the issue that there is childhood trauma. To me, is a big circumstance in relationships when they constantly go wrong. We talk about a lot of times that in relationships there's because of, and then there's in spite of, and then the one of the issues is sexual trauma. That's you know what, I'll leave that for last. Let me leave that for last because I think that's the most serious one that we have. So I'll leave that one for last. But what I'll talk about really is talking about um oh, I lost my train of thought there. Oh my Jesus. So I wanted to talk about um all right, let's go there because I can't remember where I was going with that. I should have wrote it down, but of course my brain's just doing too many. I saw a text message from Apple, and I didn't turn into Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk, and it sold a cow for some magic beans, even though I wasn't supposed to. So let me just go back to this. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. So I wanted to talk about people who so they value. So we talk about society values, right? A lot of times people just there's no values. This we come through we live in a world where everything that you do is acceptable. Like for the most part, for the most part. Not talking about violating people's rights, but your lifestyle, you can do anything you want to do now. If you want to be take your clothes off on social media, you can do that. They got OnlyFans out there. If you want to have a relationship with 10 people, you can do that. If you want to join sex clubs, you can do that. So here's the thing: when people meet people, they got to understand the values that people carry with them, and that's very important. So when you meet someone, it's kind of like, let's talk about Coming to America, the first one. So in the first Coming to America, they were sitting in the club and he was looking for a queen, right? And I have a secret. I worship the devil, and my name is Peaches, and I'm the best. All the DJs want to feel my breast and all of that. So there's a truth to that. When you meet someone, you want to know what they're about. And the problem with people is when they meet each other, they look at the attraction and then they base a relationship on the attraction. And then once they are with someone, they forget about everything else. And then once the attraction wears off, they realize what they've gotten themselves into. And a lot of times that is an investment in a Ponzi scheme because it fell apart. You've invested so many times your body, your energy, your youth, and then you find out that you're at a place that you wish you never went to in the first. So we got to look at people who they are. You got to look at where they're coming from, and some of the things you have to do, you have to look at people's upbringings, their family, their lifestyle. What kind of family they have. Are their parents together? How were their parents? Did they know their parents? um, are their parents alive? Who raised them? What are their spiritual beliefs? What are their beliefs in relationships? Are they marriage minded? What do they feel about kids? Stuff like that. And then you move on from there. And then you look at other things like their characteristics and things like that. So that is a very important part. And that's people's values and lifestyles and background information in terms of who they are and where they come from. So, Jim, expound on that.
Okay. It's funny you mentioned that Coming to America because at the end of all those interviews, the one thing at the end that the next scene, what Akeem pointing out was that he said, "Geez, does every woman in New York have emotional issues?" And that was profound. Like people, I know a lot of people didn't pick up on that because they think of the movie, they think of the comedy. But since you brought that in there, and then that scene afterwards came up, and I'm like, wow, that's profound that he would say that because it applies. Some of that applies today. It's like what you said, you have emotional issues, but he picked up on that. Most of the problem is what you says that they're so involved with the physical, the monetary, what they have versus, what they're lacking that you hold on to, that they base their relationship on that. So everyone, really what you said, they picked up on the tells of women, of individuals. Well, in the movie of women, but of individuals, everyone has a tell. It's You have to observe and to catalog what you see. And then as a relationship progresses, you have to ask those questions that most people will avoid. Do you want to get married? Do you want to have children? What do you see yourself doing in 5 years? How you see this relationship? What do you want out of it? And most people will lie or not be truthful in that regard. So you have to go back to the tell when you see these things and make a judgment for yourself if they're being honest with you or they're just keeping you around for other reasons other than what they're telling you. And excuse me, and it's a lesson that we all learn. Everyone, you haven't lived properly through life if you don't have at least one regret. And relationship wise, job wise, stuff like that, we always have a regret. The problem is not trying to get that same outcome from that one regret or those regrets that you may have, because people uses that in relationships to try to correct that regret. You should not. What you do is that you take from that and learn from it, and then you adjust on how you could have done things. And that takes a certain type of internal reflection, not on the other person, but on yourself as well. Because you'll be able to learn from that and take that experience and to try to abridge that into the next relationship, that you don't have that regret. But it's not on the other person to do that for you. It's for yourself as well. And I have plenty of regrets. We all have plenty of regrets. And you know what? Like I said, it's a part of life. Do not be ashamed of it. Okay? Do not be ashamed of your regret. It becomes a part of you. Part of it is embracing. Part of it is correcting. When you embrace that regret, it's easier to live with. You'll be able to make clearer decisions, and you don't have to keep going back to that reference point and saying, having insecurities about it. And we have to learn that, we could get over that hump. We can get over certain things like that, and that we can go forward with our best foot instead of, I won't say living in the past, but keep on having that past mistakes and your fear of not only fear of repeating them, but actually think it's normal and repeating them. It's twofold. And I really, really have a hard time with that, because as was mentioned, our childhood shapes us. It shapes us to how we interact with people. It'll shape us into how we go forward in society amongst ourselves without that dynamic. And we don't reflect upon it. And what we do have, and what you say, I call it childhood PTSD. You don't know that you have it until you put back into that similar situation and you flash back to that point in time of when that happened. Now, you have two options to me, it's more than two options, but it's two main options of you having it. Either you accept, correct, and move on from that, or you go back to that point and you repeat that. You won't repeat it, but you use that mistake over to put yourself in a shell. Secondly, what most individuals have to stop realizing with something like that is looking for closure. You might get it, you might not get it, but prepare for that disappointment if you don't get it. Don't make that be defining. Since you didn't get that, you'll go on to the next relationship hoping to get that. No. Most relationships I have are open-ended. There was no closure to it. Most of my exes I'm still friends with. Sometimes we agree amicably, sometimes we did agree amicably. But the confrontation of me saying that, not even saying I'm sorry, but acknowledging that, things didn't turn out well between us. But, moving forward, it's always a choice. And I realized that, I may have bad experiences, but in the end, I've learned from it. I didn't let it shackle me. And I was able to continue forward. And I apply it to not only relationships personally but professionally as well. And it really is a more positive influence. There's a weight lifted, and you realize that, you know what, it doesn't have to drag you, or it doesn't have to make you feel fearful or repeat the same things.
Yeah, I mean, that makes definitely a lot of sense. Um, wow, that was definitely a lot there, Jim. A lot
I'm
to
sorry,
that was
you
a
know,
lot to take in. I might
I'm
need some
sorry.
therapy after that now.
I'm sorry. I apologize, but you know what though, I'm just trying to say, you know what, I can relate, and we've all had it. Nobody's perfect. We've all had it, but you know what? As long as you recognize that we've all had it, and the situation can be, it won't be correct, especially with child, it won't be correct, but you have to realize that within yourself. And once you do, you can just say, you know what, it's okay. And just go on to the next, not the next relationship, but a new relationship with a newer thinking. That's all.
Okay. All right. I feel a little bit better now. You kind of
Okay.
you reminded me of Pulp Fiction there. Like I felt bad when John Travolta got killed, but then I didn't feel so bad when I saw him walking away at the end.
Yes, correct. Yes. It's like I said, it's that type of way of thinking, it's okay. All right. And that's what I'm trying to tell everybody. It is okay. You're not, you won't be treated like weirdly or differently, or the one person won't think less of you. That's all.
All right. So Donnie, it's funny. I'm looking at you. You look like you're sitting at a piano, an upright piano
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask what was that, but
I think so. Not to get too far from the topic because I could, I could digress. But Donnie, so what do you think about all this we're talking about here?
See, I'm having, as you said, Jim just said a lot. So if you would be so kind, could you just give me some direction?
So we're talking about basically being in a position to see, how people came up, the values. We're talking about the values that people have, their backgrounds, and things like that.
Okay. Um, a big thing that I've personally been noticing. Oh, yeah. This has to do with what should I say? This is more. Oh wait, I don't want to transition back into the parental thing, but
Yeah, you can tell us talk about that because
oh sure.
I didn't quite leave that discussion because the parental issue is still in there. It's part of that
Sure.
topic.
All right. Cool. Um, I mentioned this earlier, but I figure it might be important to say it in a different scope. You see, there's also a certain difference in values that you see as a result of generations that isn't negative, I suppose. You there's just naturally as time progresses, things are going to be different. The circumstances surrounding people as they're born are going to be different, and a lot of people become. You see a lot of parents and children who have this clash over that. They kind of they confuse it to be a difference in values, but then you'll see a lot of cases where it's just a difference in generation. Like people are saying the same thing, but they just approach it differently. So it's now got people alienating each other. I think that's a big thing people need to be aware of in situations where they're uh, receiving well, as we were just mentioning, receiving advice. There are certain differences that are just a result of people's upbringing that can't be ignored. For example, I had this one situation where someone I knew, they were into the idea of a long-standing relationship, but not so much into the idea of a marriage because there's like a legal like a government part in it, and their parents took that as them not being interested in being committed at all. um, there's small intricate differences that often cause people to have this sort of clash that I think should also be paid attention to. I just wanted to throw that out there because I mean, when you're getting advice, you as I just mentioned, you need to be aware of where it's coming from, and because sometimes people say things in a way that maybe you misconstrue it, or maybe they don't know how to word it properly. But oftentimes they're just based on non-existent differences that we've just placed in our own mind. So I just wanted to throw that out there very quickly. I had thought of that earlier.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And those are
It is
things
actually.
I wish I would have said, but it didn't come to my mind before you said it.
Remember,
So,
script writing. You have to keep that up. What do you mean?
Yeah, that's
wow,
what.
that's
That's it's true.
yeah, definitely. I wanted to put a dynamic into this conversation, and I think this is very important. And that is going back to the parents again, but from a different dynamic. So I remember a song called from Shaquille O'Neal called Biological Didn't Bother. And that's again the lack of parents. So one of the biggest problems that I often see is when a person doesn't have a parent in their life. More so, I think the father. I'm not sure why it seems like the father seems to be the biggest issue with relationships, especially, I mean, with both men and women, but especially with women. But I find whatever the father dynamic in the house is, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it has an effect on how the relationship ends for that person. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. So if the let's start from the woman's dynamic, and I think that's probably the most important. So when a girl is devoid of having a father, it seems, and depending on how it happened and the circumstances and what the child knows about the father, it often has a negative reaction from the girl. So I'll give you a perfect example. You'll see a lot of women who didn't have fathers in their life. They tend to constantly be seeking relationships and can't understand why they're always in and out of relationships. And I find when you trace back to a lot of these women that it comes back to them not having a father in their life, or the father being absent is a tragic or a traumatic story that they often, if the story is tragic and traumatic, they'll often get into bad relationships and commit to them and refuse good relationships, if that makes sense. So you'll have a woman or a young girl that they'll meet a good guy and they don't want none of that. And then if they meet a bad guy that's bad for them, they'll stay in those relationships until they can't stay in them any longer. And I find it's the issue of validation. So in my experiences and the women that I've talked to that are in those situations, the problem has always been they wanted to validate to the bad guys. And because the good guys, they have nothing to prove to the good guys, because the good guys tend to accept them as they are. They're not interested in that because they have nothing to prove to the guy, because he's like, here, it's like, I'll take you as you are. And then they don't like that because they're searching for acceptance because they've never got the acceptance from their father. So they meet these men, and when they, or these boys, and the boys that don't accept them, they want to prove themselves to those guys. So they tend to stay in the bad relationship to make them, to prove themselves to the bad guy. But when a good guy comes along, they're not interested because they don't need validation from that guy because he's validating them. But because they're searching for the void, which is reaching out to the person that's not accepting them, they often commit to the guy that's rejecting them than the one that accepts them. So that's the point in terms when I'm talking about a parent being missing. And the guy's similar to but different dynamics. So let's talk on the young ladies now. If you don't have anything to share about that, you can pass. But if you have any thoughts that you can share on that, of course, I'd appreciate it. So Jim, what do you have? Passing?
Passing, yeah, I'm gonna have to pass the ball on this one.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can get on this one.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so he's not taking a light of that spliff. He's passing. Pass the Dutchie on the left hand side. All right,
Of
Donnie,
course.
go ahead. Spit some fire, Dylon.
Hopefully you don't mind if I talk about both women and men
together. Let's talk to the ladies.
The women, yeah, ladies
a guy
first, yeah.
that I want to specifically bring up right after this. So as soon as we finish, I'm going to go into the guys right after that. And
okay.
then you can say what if you remember. So if you, I don't know if you have.
No, I wrote it down. No, okay. I wrote it.
So we're going to go right into the guys right after we do the girls and the ladies.
Sure. I think you see and don't worry, I'm not going to actually get into it. You see like this kind of split both ways. You have for women, you have a lot of the ones that end up just as you said, where they are in need of validation, thus they go to that lesser person for that reason. You also see, I've also noticed this a lot recently. You'll see a lot if they didn't have a father figure and they're particularly bothered by that. I mean, obviously that's a traumatic thing, but if they're particularly been affected by that, you see these people who these women who date older men because it feels like a hole that was left over is somewhat filled, even if they're not truly even into the idea of older men. They just go for that because it feels like they got to have that figure present that they didn't have. I've actually seen there was an interview with one of these people, one of these women who were dating an older man, and basically a lot of the things she was attributing to liking about the relationship were things she'd like out of a father, like having guidance and things like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there because that's a big archetype that you see right next to those who need validation.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting. Yeah.
So now I wanted to go over to the guys and the men. So now the guys and the men, so the women have a whole issue, but there's also the men's side is extremely dysfunctional. And as a guy, I can speak to that. And so not having a father is definitely a big problem for men because one was not even just having the father, but having a father with guidance. Because a lot of times we depend on our fathers to teach us how to be men. So if you don't have a father, then you don't know how to participate in being a man. Now, of course, there's this whole thing about toxic masculinity. I don't want to even get into that. That's a whole another discussion that I'm not willing to have. But there's just certain behaviors, how to conduct yourself, how to deal with women, how to accept rejection and things like that. Mm-hmm. So when you don't have a father or male father figure in your life, you don't know how to do anything. And you're basically experimenting when you're a young man. You experiment and then you don't know what to do from that point on because you're like, oh, well, I just got rejected. How do I respond to that? And there's just certain things that, you can give advice, but there's just a bond that a father has with his son that lets him know that everything is going to be okay. So you need that father there to kind of guide you in how to grow up, and a lot of times because there's so many young men growing up without a father, they don't know how to react to life. So you see a lot of things. You see kids out on the street, they're getting raised by the street, and the streets are the worst parents in the world. The street is probably the worst father a guy can have because the street will have your child dead, in prison, strung out, all types of things. So when there's no father there, then the boy, the man, they become a teenager and they get into relationships and they become men. They don't know how to function. They don't know how to be a leader. They don't know how to be a provider. They don't know how to do the things that a father will need to do, a husband, a boyfriend. They don't know how to function appropriately. And then they do things by experiment, things that their friends tell them, these outside influences, TV, as we talked about before, Disney, and they're trying and failing because they don't have the answer. So it's very important, that these young men have these guidances because they're all over the place when they grow up. And then you have the other thing about um, grooming, how to make yourself presentable to a young lady, um, respect, respect for yourself, respect for women and girls, not to put your hands on them, to regard them, to know when to move on. Don't be a crazy boyfriend. Don't be a crazy husband, and stuff like that. So that's a big thing. So when you meet a guy or you meet a person, well, let's just talk about the guy right now because I want to tie this in at the end of that discussion. So I'll stop there and I'll let Jim, and then I'll kind of tie it in after Donnie because I want to tie that in. And I think for the most part, we pretty much I want to leave it on this topic here because I think this is the most important one. All right, Jim, you passing still, or are you ready to jump
No,
in?
no, this one I could definitely jump in on.
Okay.
I got the Dutch on this one. Um, yeah, I agree with you on the male versus male dynamic, father and son dynamic. I grew up without a father, and I can tell you I was very, 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 very lost. I had no map, no guide, nothing, nothing, and it was the most difficult time in my life. If you cannot discern things, it's hard to separate things. And, having a father figure gives you the type of temperament to go through these challenges. And where you don't have the temperament to balance the foundation and you're just out there on your own, if you don't crumble under that weight, like you said, the streets will gladly pick you up and they will chew you up and spit you out. And depending on how you take that experience, you either do the options that you have, or you will come out scarred and have a type of mentality that is not really, I won't say accepted, but it'll be, in the opposite of a successful relationship. Um, the grooming part, yes, that's difficult. Learning how to shave, learning what fits you and not what fits somebody else. Because when you have no guidance, you end up emulating again. And you might pick up a habit that is not necessarily in your nature, and it will change you. And you will feel so conflicted within yourself. You do not know what to do. You'll have questions, self doubt, and you have nowhere to turn for an answer except that same type of ideal or individual that gave you that doubt in the first place. It's always going to be a struggle, and that type of dynamic between from male to male is necessary. Passes on what they have learned and to give it to you so you can minimize your mistakes. You're always going to make mistakes, but it's the minimalization, installation, and take it as a learning experience. The rejection is the first and foremost that really spoke out to me. When a girl rejects you, what do you do? Most of the men who don't have that strong or temperamental male father figure is going to lash out at the girl, at other women after that who rejects them. And it's not a good look because you are trying to force a situation that a person may not feel comfortable with, and they feel that the other person is the problem. And it may be yourself, but without not know that until you have an epiphany. And then, you're gonna play the role of victim all the time, you're gonna feel a certain way, you're gonna have anger, resentment, all that building up, and with no actual outlet to correct that or to make that temperament, you're going to keep on with that type of thing until, like I said, you aren't have an epiphany, or boom, you You're just gonna keep on repeating the same mistakes. I've learned that from that experience that whatever other men or boys that come up to me with looking for something, I tend to try to give the best advice possible based on my experiences for them. And I tell them, sometimes stuff that they don't want to hear, but it's it should be told to them. They could be angry. They could say, don't fear on taking on that some of that how they feel, because if you don't do it, they'll they'll build up and it will come out in the worst possible way on another person, or God forbid a woman. And it's like I say, it's hard to take on that, and it's difficult, but having heard another opinion or having have another option, or it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that one outcome that you always have to get. There's another way, and you can better yourself. You can evolve, and that's the problem with most men. They don't really want to evolve. They just see what's out there and expect it to work for them, and it might not fit them, and they don't realize it might not fit them. That's the difficult lesson I had to learn, that most of the things that are out there did not fit me. It wasn't me. It wasn't, I won't say in my nature, but it wasn't something that I wasn't willing to evolve or de-evolve into. So to me, that type of dynamic is very important for a guy. If you don't have that, and you're going to look for that in another guy, just be careful. I won't say be careful, but observe, and don't be afraid to ask real tough questions. And for men, if you cannot answer that, it's okay as well. Everybody's experience is different. Um, it will be hard to say that, and that's what men we have to get over. We don't know. And if you really don't know, I'd rather say I don't know than leading a person on a wrong or different path based upon my own ignorance. So that's really, how I see things, and how from my experience, how I try to approach things with individuals younger than me, especially guys.
All right, Donnie. So I think you're gonna have the final voice on this topic here, and before we just close out the show. So share with us, please.
Sure. I suppose hopefully I don't sound like I'm trying to be too much like Jim when I say this, but trying to put it into an analogy, I guess it's like an animal sanctuary can raise an animal perfectly fine and give it a great life. However, it should be raised in the wilderness where it belongs. That's kind of how I view the lack of a father figure, right? You if you are to grow up to be a man, whatever that means to you, but if you're to grow up to be a man, you should have someone else who has gone through that entire life's worth of experience, who was also a man there to kind of guide you. Um, a mother will of course do all they can, and that's respectable, and that should be appreciated, of course. However, there are just finer intricacies that they can't tackle because they didn't live that life, and that's not their fault, but that's just how it is. Just in my own experience, a lack of a father figure has, of course, both of you have mentioned, it leads to an inability to interact with women entirely. I've seen it where it's not that they don't know how to go talk to a woman in general. It's like because all they grew up with was their mother, maybe they're going to approach another woman as if they are their mother, if you get what I mean. They're approaching them from a very docile, very muted point where it can't really get past that because their relationship isn't being set up in the right way. Or I've seen it in the exact opposite, where maybe they had some resentment that they were holding on to, which led to them treating other women or even just people in general in not the right way. And very quickly, a thing that you see on either end, a woman or a man, without a father figure, you might see this a lot. It's the inability to let go of something when they should. I think that's a big issue that happens, because when you had a parent who, at least to your knowledge, willingly walked out on you, you then might develop an issue with attachment and things like that. You might feel that abandonment. I think that's a big thing to for people who lack some sort of parental figure to keep in mind, because it when you have this idea, when you go into this into the world with this idea where anyone's going to abandon me, it could happen, or you're just anxious over that, then you're going to be staying in situations that you don't need to be in because they'll stay. I think that's I just wanted to leave that out, since you said I might be one of the last voices. I just want to throw that out there for people listening.
Yeah, and I'm really gonna just close it out there. We pretty much had a nice meaty show today, and yeah, so I hope when you think about all of these things that we're talking about and see that these are things that you have to reflect upon if you're struggling in relationships and you want these things to get better for yourself, is you have to not be observant just of the person that you're you're dealing with, but who you are as well. So when you meet people, you want to know who they are and where they come from and what they're about. But you also want to know for yourself who you are, where you come from, and what you're about. Because without doing that, you'll find yourself in the same relationships over and over again and getting the same results over and over again. There's so many people who breathe their last breath alone, with no one to care for them, no one to love them, and for the most part, no one who's truly valued them. So the point here is to examine not just other people, but examine yourself so that you can better evaluate the relationships that you're getting into and the people that you're meeting. So that's really the point of this episode here, is because so many people go through life believing that they're sinless when they're nothing but sinful, as we all are. We all got things about us that are messed up in terms of relationships, and we have to remove those things from our lives to engage in healthy relationships with other people, not even just romantic, but just everyday relationships, because you'd be surprised in the things that we've experienced in our life that kind of moves into other areas of our life, at work, friends, stuff like that. And all those things factor into how we live our life every day. So you have to take all of those things into consideration. And we thank everyone for tuning in, especially those of you who are listening on Anchor and those who are catching us on YouTube, watching our lovely faces. Well, anyway, Jim and Donnie's lovely face. And with that being said, this is your host, Johnathan St. James. And again, this is The Truth is Still Straight. Thank you for tuning in. I'll let the guys say goodbye and we'll finish from there.
Enjoy, everyone. Enjoy your week. Take care.
Thanks for listening.